Score, the podcast. The only show taking you inside the studios of the world's most celebrated composers and musicians.
Coming to you this week from Santa Monica. Seems like all the composers love Santa Monica.
And who can blame them?
This is Score the Podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Holmes.
I'm
my
Robert
co-host,
Kraft.
Robert Kraft. Yeah.
I could
He's gonna
step right
introduce
on
himself.
you. We could talk over each other, and I think that would be like a duet. We could do it that way.
It'd be like our Name That Score.
Or Name That Score. And that's Matt Schrader, who's here running the board and keeping us all on task to get our questions together for this week's guest.
A huge guest. And we're here in his studio. That's what brings us to Santa Monica. We're inside the studios of Grammy-winning, Emmy-winning, 8-time Oscar-nominated composer James Newton Howard.
I can honestly say James Newton Howard was the first composer that I heard doing a movie score that I felt was moving towards this kind of new era of film composing that was modern and kind of pop yet classic. There was something really cool about his music that I related to right away and thought, this is a new voice.
And you're going to know his music from the Hunger Games movies. He also did Batman Begins and The Dark Knight with Hans Zimmer, The Sixth Sense, even all the way back to Pretty Woman. And I mean, there's so many great movies. If you IMDb him, you'll be like, oh my God. Especially here in the hallway of his studio, there's just gold records and movie posters. And I'm like, oh, he did that too? Oh my goodness.
Right. The Fugitive.
Yeah,
Blood Diamond, King Kong, which we have a little clip of.
The new Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and then also he's doing, I think, the sequels coming up too.
He just had Red Sparrow in theaters moments ago.
He's got to be one of the busiest composers working today.
He, I'm sure, is probably, how many days in a year? 365? Is that where we are? I'd say 360.
That hasn't changed in a while.
I'd say 362
every 4 years.
or 3 is James Newton Howard's schedule for writing film music. It has to be with these number of films under his belt.
Also coming up in today's episode, a Behind the Score segment featuring Hans Zimmer, Oscar-winning composer. You may have heard of him. And also, we're going to play Name That Score with James Newton Howard. And the topic today?
Danny Elfman scores.
Ooh.
Backwards.
One of my favorite scores, Batman.
Yeah, that might be one of the questions.
Edward Scissorhands, a big favorite in the Kraft family home.
That just reminded me, I need a haircut.
Wow.
All right, I want to jump into a couple things.
Shoot.
Disney has released a score-only track for The Last Jedi when they for the home video.
That sounds cool.
So you'll have the regular film, maybe a director track, and then one track with just the score. And it got me wondering if this is going to be something that's moving forward. I mean, if you're going to start a trend, Star Wars is probably
good place to start.
A good place to start. And, John Williams.
I think we're in a place where more and more people are really aware of film music. We're in that era. So I think it's
Clearly,
a great
if
idea.
they're releasing a cut, of a track here that you can listen to the whole thing with the music, where there's something happening.
And actually, you're not only starting with Star Wars, you're starting with the maestro of maestros.
Well, it's interesting, too, because most scores, I mean, when you get the album version, there's stuff that's not on the album that's in the film, and maybe it's stepped on by dialogue. So this may actually be unveiling other parts of a score that you may not have, soloed out in a track like that.
That makes me wonder too, Robert. You have some experience inside of the studio system, but are you privy to any conversations you think that would have led to something like this in the past? Have they ever released a score only track to a Blu-ray or DVD version of something, or is that brand new?
Yes, no, maybe, sometimes. Every director has fantasies of releasing additional content, and every idea you can ever imagine was suggested, and basically, until this, always shot down. There was...
So this is a breakthrough here.
It is. It was, hey, we need a soundtrack of... Can we get a soundtrack of just the sound effects? Oh, well, it's a fair idea, but I don't think anybody would... I mean, I sat through all those meetings, and they always want as much in the marketplace as possible. This is new.
Plus, it's just kind of, if you're a diehard fan of something, and you've watched it so many times, you don't really need the
A
dialogue.
super fan.
And I've only encountered this type of thing once on. I saw part of The Matrix, and on one of the extended, whatever packages they had of that, they advertised a composer track, and they had Don Davis on there, and it was mixed so that there was no dialogue. It was his score, and he would just completely step out for a couple pieces of music, and you could see the visual storytelling. The start of The Matrix is that kind of famous thing that's been endlessly parodied of jumping up in the air, the camera's rotating around and everything, and the kind of trumpet sound that they had and all of that stuff that was really different when that came out. And it wasn't until a few minutes in you would hear him say, "Okay, Don Davis here, the composer of this." But you could hear these big chunks of the movie and kind of follow. Now, granted, there's not much dialogue there, but you could follow the scene and really hear that music, and it's a really cool experience.
It's interesting because it lets the audience understand a little bit more about what the film composer does and what he or she looks at to make decisions. Speaking of cool music, I've been listening to the soundtracks of 2 new television shows both of which I absolutely adore. And it's interesting to hear the way they're being musicalized because they're predominantly song scores, and they are very, very contemporary song scores. It's The Chai, which is, I believe that's how it's pronounced. It's about Chicago.
It's Shy. The Shy.
The Shy. Well, I see The Chai, which is a difference about tea. The Shy.
At least that's how I hear the kids saying it on the street.
Okay, I'm going with The Shy.
I'm from the Shy.
The Shy. I've been saying The Chai, which is probably why no one knows what I'm talking about.
They just give you a cup of tea.
Right. The music in The Shy is so great, and the needle drops of the songs are great. Equally great is the music from Atlanta.
Oh.
And the music from
Awesome.
Atlanta on both sides, it's both Ludwig Göransson, who scored Black Panther and does a lot of work with Donald Glover.
Childish Gambino.
Right, Childish Gambino, exactly right. But just the really great Atlanta music, down trap music, super cool music. I know that Donald Glover has a lot to do with it. Donald's partner in crime and manager, Fam, also works on it, Jen Malone. That music I find tremendously a real great character in the Atlanta series, and I listen for the music each episode because it's another way to score films and score television shows is with songs of the moment.
It's kind of been underutilized in the last decade or so. We've seen a little bit more and more Black Panther. Used a lot of a lot of those kind of trap.
Actually, The
Ludwig
Matrix.
Göransson.
The Matrix, coming full circle, used electronic music, and Don Davis' score was in between big needle drops of electronic cues.
Yep.
It's cool the way Atlanta does it too, because they're in clubs a lot, or they're in the car, and the editing, the way they do the songs, it'll be the song is scoring a scene, and then they'll get into a car, and then that same song is like sounding different to your ears, but it's playing in the car or in the club or something like that.
Just the way the songs are used, it's so impressive, and I'm a big fan.
Well, we've got a big guest. We're here in his studio. Coming up after the break, you want to stick around. We're going to talk with 8-time Oscar-nominated, Grammy-winning, Emmy-winning composer James Newton Howard. We're here. He's coming in. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Hi, Film Score fans. Matt Schrader here from Score the Podcast. We need your support as we launch into this competitive podcast world. If you like what you're hearing, tell a friend. We're working to bring you the best guests possible from the music of the screen. Better yet, leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks for telling a friend and supporting Score.
Hey, we're here with James Newton Howard. A real privilege to be in James' studio, one of the great composers of film music of our generation and
Grammy-winning,
any generation.
Emmy-winning,
Correct.
8-time Oscar-nominated composer. Thanks for having us in, James.
Hey, it's nice to be here. Glad you guys could make it.
Oh, it's just a privilege. It really is. I think I've said that once. I might say it 3 times because I was thinking about music of yours that's influenced me, and I just asked the date of one of my favorite films, and it was just when I was beginning to understand film music. It was a score of yours. it's a big surprise coming up.
Okay.
But we have...
What a tease.
Yeah, it is. Well, I like to be that way. We had a discussion about James Newton Howard recently where I was told something I didn't realize, which is that the end of Signs, I was told James had said at one point that was one of the hardest cues he'd ever written. Is there something specific about this moment or this film that made this so difficult?
Well, they're kind of all difficult, as
That's
you know.
what I was going to say.
That one, I think it was the fact that it was the first 30 versions weren't as difficult.
Oh, man.
Getting into the 40th and the 43rd and 44th versions. I just rewrote it for months.
Is it because the film kept changing, the actual footage was changing in front of you, that you had to keep rewriting, or the director just said, this isn't doing it for me? Do you remember?
It was more the latter, but they were subtle changes. It's not as though I rewrote, reimagined the entire cue. They were just, where are we going to peak? What themes, if any, are we going to reprise? I mean, how bold can we be over an interior scene when it's just a guy swinging a baseball bat and still maintain our credibility? And maybe we didn't, I'm not sure. But, with Knight's movies, which has been kind of a burden for him, I think, to some extent, for a period of time, there was such a large, great expectation of some incredible big finale ending. And so, the endings were always of great concern and great focus of attention. So, I think since then, I've had a lot more difficult cues since then. But that was a milestone for sure.
I'm wondering, you said it. I look at what you do and think, is it ever easy? I actually wasn't a question I was intending to ask, but I can't imagine you walking into a film and say, cakewalk. Is there ever a cakewalk?
Pretty Woman might have been a cakewalk.
How nice.
That was 20 minutes of piano and strings. But I don't get those anymore. I get the 2 hours of music and wall-to-wall and huge all hell breaking loose, and that's good. I'm really honored, and I love that kind of a score. It's a big music opportunity, and that's kind of where I live. So,
and speaking of music opportunities, with The Dark Knight, you did that with Hans Zimmer. Amazing score. When you partner up with somebody, how do you decide who does what? You did the Harvey Dent theme, and how do you divvy that up?
Well, we really kind of changed from the first one. In Batman Begins, we truly both touched every cue, and we were both kind of looking over each other's shoulders. We were set up in adjacent film studios at Air Studios, at recording studios at Air in London. And I would hear what Hans was writing, and he could hear what I was writing, and we would just kind of reach over and four hands on the keyboard, truly, at various times. Until, we had a kind of it was always a friendly kind of competitive atmosphere. And I would say that Hans certainly has to be credited with the famous two-note French horn theme. I had written what I thought was a really good theme and played for that moment when Bruce Wayne goes into the Bat Cave and all the bats come flying around. And I thought it was pretty good. And then the next day, Hans arrived with his infamous kind of ostinato with the two French horn notes, and that was clearly the way to go. So it was a mutual effort on that one in terms of pretty much every cue. I would say in The Dark Knight it got much more delineated.
Lennon and McCartney. In other words, verse and
I wouldn't go that
8-bar
far.
bridge.
Well, I remember one day at the beginning of The Dark Knight, Hans was out of town or something, or I guess he just hadn't arrived yet for a meeting, and I was over at his place. And I walked into his studio, and I was just sitting there waiting for him, and I saw his sequencers there. And I just said, God, I really want to just hit the space bar and see what happens. And I did. And I hit the space bar, and that whole preamble by bank robbery cue came up.
Ooh, such an incredible scene.
Such an incredible
But
score.
who knows who wrote that? No
He
one.
wrote it.
Right. Oh, you're generous.
No, he wrote that, and it just blew me away. And I kind of thought, wow, why am I even on this movie?
You're modest.
Well, it evolved, and then we did both contribute. And you're right. I was lucky enough to work on the Harvey Dent stuff, and a bunch of other things as well. But That one was more, he'll take the Joker, I'll take Harvey Dent. He'll take this, I'll take that. But
Did you ever switch off and say, hey, I'm going to take a stab at this character or write sort of alternate themes?
yeah, sure. It wasn't consciously set out that way, but there were plenty of scenes where, the Joker would walk into or he would cross-pollinate into a scene with Harvey Dent, and I'd be working on Harvey Dent, and I'd sort of do something Jokerish. But yeah, we found our way.
Robert does a lot of Jokerish
I was
things.
going to say, I'm trying to think of anything I do that isn't Jokerish. I had another curious moment recently. My youngest son, Lucas Kraft, his favorite cue is from King Kong. I mean, he's a big film music fan. You wouldn't think it because he's not in film music, but
Wow,
this
quick.
is like his theme. When he's going to do something kind of epic. It has been for years too. And this question is actually from Lucas. He said,
Okay.
and I think he said, I heard that James wrote that in 2 weeks, the whole movie music. I said, I don't know if it's 2 weeks, but I can ask him. But I know that there was a big change and you came in to rescue or change. Was everything replaced? Did you start from scratch? And how long did you have?
Well, it wasn't 2 weeks. It was 4.5 weeks. And
That's still insane.
it's totally insane.
Completely.
And I'll never do it again. And, I'm still recovering from it. I don't know how many, a decade at least ago, but I couldn't do it now. I was at a point somehow where, I'm getting old now, Robert. I mean, come on, I'm 66 years old.
No way.
But
36.
I was able to, it was that adrenaline thing. I mean, I got a call from my agent saying, "Are you interested in doing this?" And he could barely, it was very sotto voce. And I said, "Of course." That I was at dinner that night. And,
Amazing.
I went right back to the studio and started writing that about 10 o'clock without seeing any picture. And the next day, talked to Peter, and we were off and running.
I read somewhere that you met Peter over Skype. Is that right?
Well, we did the whole thing. It was, over a Polycom. It's basically a fancy Skype. But I recorded the whole score and worked out the whole thing with myself here and Peter in New Zealand. We finally met at the premiere. So,
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was.
How about the hours, the time difference? Were you doing strange hours here so that he could be awake?
Yeah, I mean, I was basically working around the clock, so it was, that wasn't too much of a problem. So if it was 2 a.m. here, and he, that had to be the time that he was around, I was still working. So
What's that dynamic like? When you've never met someone, you're working on something, so I mean, you really have to connect with a director on these projects. You're coming in sort of last minute, so to speak, relatively speaking, and you've
Not
never
relatively speaking, like
Literally.
last minute.
yeah, and you've never met, and I mean, I know you're video calling or you're talking, but is it different than sitting there with someone and sort of being in the room and feeling them out?
Yeah, it is. But to me, and I don't know what happened with Howard and
Howard Shore.
Howard Shore and Peter. Obviously, they have a profound relationship that's been incredibly successful, and Howard's an amazing composer. And I don't know what happened. I never asked. I know when I think of King Kong, I immediately had kind of a sense of what I would want to do. And when I saw some of the film, I just felt a clarity about what it wanted to be, and
Wow,
I lucked out.
Beautiful and lucky, and thank God that what you saw, you didn't realize, oh my goodness, I've really gone in the wrong direction. The interesting thing to me is whether sometimes when you have a gun at your head, you do your best work, because it's just a huge score. I mean, it's just a tremendously
It is.
emotional.
And I was really, I remember when it didn't get nominated. I never I rattled about that because I really don't think about it. But I thought, I knew that there was some kind of consensus in the music community that I couldn't have written that myself. That I must have brought 25 guys, and I did write it myself, and I was really proud of it, and I felt really hurt that oddly enough, how stupid is that? I mean, to feel hurt when you don't get a nomination, but that one really made me angry.
I just wonder how you hear doom, doom. I can't do the interval.
Minor sixth.
Yeah, is it a minor sixth?
Yeah, D, B flat, E flat.
My
D.
Bonnie lives
Lies
over the ocean would be a major sixth.
Yeah, I guess
So
you're
I have
right.
to flat it.
Is that what you thought when you first heard the theme? I ripped off my Bonnie Funk.
Yeah, my
This is-
gorilla lies over the ocean.
I mean,
I
no.
didn't think. I thought that interval is very emotional. I don't know why, and I didn't know what it was till this moment that it's a minor sixth.
Yeah.
It's very. You pine for something when you hear that.
Well, it's a sad story.
Yes.
You know, it is. It's
Yeah.
a sad story. And I mean, that...
Did that theme come to you before you saw a picture? Do you have any memory of when you said you heard music and then you saw a picture? Did that theme the night at dinner sort of show up as epic, sad? Because that's a powerful piece of music.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I would say, no, that didn't just appear. That it probably came as a result of immersion in the movie a little bit, and just something that had to be broad and expansive and kind of dark and mysterious and portentous, and where does it come from? Who knows?
I am occasionally portentous, my wife says, but I
Pretentious?
maybe that's what she says. I always think I'm portentous.
Can I ask one other quick question about King Kong and other movies where?
Wow, he sounds like such a DJ. He's good.
Just wait till later.
Oh, yeah, you'll be surprised. We for name that score. We have there's the thought when you come in and quote unquote rescue a film or come in very, very late in the process and you're writing music quickly. Do you find that you get any more leniency from the director, given that time is now a major factor, or is the tension all the more stressful?
Well, first of all, you do not get any more leniency. I mean,
You know what, man? Just write a B+ score for this. You don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, just okay will do. No, you don't get any leniency. But I think, as Robert said, it's unquestionably true that if you have a small amount of time, if you're really under the gun, I think that's kind of what a film composer does. I mean, you have to write hopefully well, and you have to write quickly, and you have to rewrite quickly, and so. I think the conditions are all pretty much the same, except you just have a lot less time.
Well, you can't psych yourself out either, right? You got to just make decisions and go with it.
Well, it's easy to panic. I panicked a little bit, and that there's a scene in the Fifth Avenue when King Kong is rampaging through the city, and he stops and he sees Anne standing there, and he picks her up, and they go to this kind of beautiful platonic kind of love moment, which they really shared for each other. And I rewrote that theme for Peter over and over and over as days would pass, and I still didn't get it. And I was kind of quietly freaking out, but we eventually got it.
All right, guys, we got to pause for just a minute. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about James's classic Oscar-nominated score for The Fugitive and touch on Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. But first, Behind the Score.
Behind the Score. The inside stories from Hollywood's greatest filmmakers and composers.
If there's any one dominant sound in Hollywood over the past 2 decades, it's that of Hans Zimmer. Born in Germany and raised in England, his accent is as unique as his musical interest, encompassing the emotion of the story while pushing the limits of what a score can achieve. To Hans, every second is a valuable one, and a film starts as soon as the production company logos appear.
I always try to grab those first few moments. I try to get into the logos. I mean, just give me that little bit of real estate for the music to just do that. I mean, Sherlock Holmes, you hear the timbalom and the violins. You know it's not going to be a normal Sherlock Holmes movie. The whole idea of setting up this idea of taking the audience on a journey that they might not expect.
Zimmer says it's a tactic he first employed on The Lion King, for which he won an Academy Award.
Here the expectation was, up till then, Beauty and the Beast, etc. These movies had been very much, these Broadway princess fairy tales.
Once upon a time, in a faraway land, a young prince lived in a shining castle.
And here we were doing this weird thing in Africa and what have you. So I thought, if right at the beginning I put my friend Lebo M's voice, I mean that chant. It just sort of says, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is going to be different. but it's going to be interesting. And so come along on this journey. Batman, you hear those bat flaps. Just tiny little iconic things that will tell the audience to expect sort of the unexpected. Great film music can elevate the movie, and I think that's really what you should aim for. So part of it is this, where our job is we can invite the audience in to have an emotional experience, not to tell them what to feel, but to tell them that the possibility exists to feel something.
Zimmer's work on The Lion King earned him not only an Oscar, but also a Grammy for the album, and launched a Tony Award-winning Broadway play. Disney is currently in production of a live-action Lion King film directed by Jon Favreau, set to release in 2019, for which Zimmer is writing the original score.
For more stories behind the score, read Score, The Interviews, based on the international hit film Score, a film music documentary featuring raw insight from Hans Zimmer, James Cameron, Quincy Jones, Randy Newman, Trent Reznor, and many more. Score, The Interviews, available now at score-movie.com.
Hey, we're back with James Newton Howard, and as I threatened at the beginning of the podcast,
The deep tease.
I wanted to ask him about a film score that he wrote probably before I even knew that I was going to be deeply involved in film music, that I thought, there are a couple things you hear in life that you think, I wish I'd written that. I knew I couldn't write like that, but Matt, if you have this one, this is one of my favorite film scores of yours, and I also think it's a benchmark in film scoring.
From The Fugitive.
It's from The Fugitive. I always thought that was just super cool.
Well, thanks, Robert.
I just thought all the kind of jagged piano married to the rhythm, and I also think that you influenced film scoring going forward, because there were a lot of scores after that that started to kind of use that way of driving the action. Do you remember? In other words, action cues before that felt fairly consistently a certain way. That one was hip. That was just, it was jarring, it was dissonant, it was rhythmic in a way. And I remember where I heard it and how I knew Celia Ward. She was in the movie.
Oh, right, yeah.
She was
played the murdered wife.
Yes.
Beautiful.
And I think we went to the premiere, and I remember hearing that. It's called The Stairway Chase.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, this is new. I'd never heard it. Had you written like that before? Did The Fugitive bring that out?
Well, for me, I don't know, you said it you very kindly and generously that you consider it something of a landmark score. It certainly was to me personally, because it scared me to death. I'd done one action movie before that, The Package, which was also directed by Andy Davis, and that was a big struggle. But when I saw The Fugitive, I had put some Jerry Goldsmith up against a couple scenes from a couple of his movies, and I completely panicked because it was so good.
Oh.
I thought, wow, that was a big mistake. I should have put up Harold Faltermeyer or something.
Right, exactly.
It would have given me, not that he's not great, but it would have given me more confidence.
Yeah.
I'm a pianist, so it was, I think Jerry heavily influenced me in those days. I still think he has a kind of a big part of my voice.
I saw a great photograph of you and him as we walked into your beautiful studio.
Yeah. I mean, I had the pleasure of hanging out with him a little bit, and he was just so supportive of me in the early days. But, when you're doing something, you're just trying to survive. That's what I was doing. Andy, when I talked to Andy, he thought my score was too big. And I said, I think you have a big action movie here. I really was thinking of it in terms of Philip Noyce, or I was thinking of it in some of Horner's great stuff. And is it Jack Ryan, that character in some of those movies? Yeah. I think you have a really big, epic kind of chase movie here. And he finally got used to the idea. And the piano just kind of came along because that's what I do. And a lot of my early scores are piano-based. And then I really intentionally started to become more orchestrally oriented because I wanted to get away from the piano. But, yeah.
What's interesting you say about, it's too big. I think what I dug the most about this sound is that it's kind of lean and not overt.
Right.
It's like snakes in there as, tension and propels it, but it's not what I was used to in action movies, is big orchestral things saying, now we're running away.
Right.
But this was a kind of moment that said, it's really tense and it's interior in a way. I can't explain it any better than that. It's not over orchestrated and it's not over big, and yet it nails it.
Well, it feels to me, I feel a sense of the original Fugitive, of the TV show in the 60s, because it does have a 60s thing about it.
I see that.
And in much the same way, I think that King Kong had a feeling of a classic 40s kind of score.
The original.
And that's not intentional. That's just because, what are we other than everything we've ever heard and absorbed and then spew out again? So I think without question, I was kind of unconsciously remembering the original score.
There's also in that cue, I'm not sure we heard all of it, there's a little bit of a sequencer going of a kind of electronic thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if that was something that you were experimenting with at that time, had used a lot, knew would be a part of the future of film music, but there's kind of a rhythmic thing that goes under it.
That was, something I did and a lot of other people did as well, a lot in the 80s and 90s. And, I worry sometimes that will sound incredibly dated someday. And I think in places it does a little bit now. But even then, I remember consciously trying to imagine what this was going to sound like 25 years from now, and just tamping that down a little bit, tamping some of the electronics down a little bit, so it just felt like, okay, it's a credible part of the vocabulary of the orchestra, and not something outside of it, but just something that you could say, well, that can be part of the orchestra from now on.
I want to touch on Fantastic Beasts, because you've come into this sort of Harry Potter spin-off world. It's a musical world. There's, the music's a big character in Harry Potter. What elements do you pull from that world, and then where do you kind of go your own direction and start fresh, or how do you find that middle point?
Well, listen, when you follow in the footsteps of the greatest guy who ever did it, it's pretty much the case with John Williams, and what score is better known than his theme for Harry Potter and that incredible collaboration that occurred. So I came into it first incredibly humbly, very respectful, but I did want to put my own stamp on it and end up with my own thematic material. That was really important to me. I mean, I knew we would have a little bit of Hedwig's theme over the WB logo in the front and in a couple other places, but I fought really hard to get my thematic material in there and get John's out. And that is nothing personal, John, if you ever hear this. It's just because it was a new franchise. Harry Potter isn't born for 80 years yet, so why would you theoretically, if you look at the logic, why there is no logic to play Hedwig's theme in a story where Hedwig doesn't exist for another 80 years. So, we finally got there, and I basically embraced John's orchestral sound as best as I could. Nobody does it quite like he does, but I knew it was going to be fairly sophisticated orchestral writing, and I found that just a wonderful challenge, and it's something I was really anxious to do.
Is there some push and pull with the producers and the people involved wanting that sound? Because with the whole thing with temp music and people coming in wanting to hear a certain sound, do you really have to fight that, or how lenient are they letting you take control of that situation?
Well, again, the movie is going to be screened in front of recruited audiences and executives and friends and family, and all kinds of people are going to respond to the score. I would say that it was a question of a constant engagement over a long period of time, and me just listening to what David Yates had to say, and he was very articulate about it. But you have to remember, that was the first movie of a new franchise, so that score and every aspect of that movie was subject to intense scrutiny, because everybody wanted to make sure the launch of this new thing was going to be successful. And I think now that we did have a big success with the first one, that there's a higher trust level and everybody feels more comfortable, and there's some kind of shorthand creatively. Well,
you must have passed the audition, because you're doing Fantastic Beasts 2.
And 3.
And 3.
As it turns out, yeah.
Oh my goodness, you're booked.
I'll be beasting for a while.
When do you beast next?
I'm in the middle of writing it right now. We record it in August. And then it'll be kind of the same schedule in 2020.
Wow.
So,
Do you feel like with a series, this was the case with maybe the Hunger Games too, but do you feel like a second movie, or even the Batman movies, do you feel like with a second movie you can expand musically and embrace some of the themes that maybe felt new to an audience in the first movie?
yeah, I think you can within reason. I think you have to do it in a way that is supportive of the film. You can't just try, I want to use my theme again so people start to get used to it. But, the second one is such a different movie from the first one. It's much more, it's much denser, it's perhaps darker. A lot of what happens in a first movie like that is you're introducing all the characters and there's a lot of exposition. But this one is really exciting and all kinds of new people are introduced and, it's really fun.
I just love to hear you say this one is really exciting, which means, needless to say, and why would any of us be surprised that you still get excited about going to work every day and doing stuff, and that in some ways is as inspiring as my final question of the day for you.
Wow.
We're really,
what a build-up
We're
there.
really cruising. But I think when I first learned about you, one of the coolest things that I was told was that you had been in bands and that you had been playing keyboards with rock stars. And I thought, first of all, as a young composer, that felt to me like, wow, you mean you can cross over? Because I was so in pop music. In fact, I don't know if you know, you actually improved a record that I produced. And I learned from your additional overdubs and production. Oh, I never would have thought of that. And it was really meaningful to me.
What was it?
It was Vonda Shepard,
Oh,
Don't
right.
Cry Eileen. You added these synth pads. I had done it all acoustically. She brought you or Benny Medina or somebody said, we need a little something, and you put these synth pads. It so made the record work. I just learned. Okay,
That was a great record. She's a great artist.
Great artist. And I know that, of course, I even saw as I walked in here, I didn't mention it because I wanted to ask about it. There's a picture of you and Elton John. And I'm sure you've been asked 1,000 times, but I don't know the story of how you met Elton or Elton found you. And I thought you'd share with our listeners that piece of your career, including why you didn't go off to become a touring musician for the rest of your life, playing gigs and around the world. How film music took you away from that. I'd love to know.
It's one of those. Joining Elton's band was one of those miracles that happens to you. And one day, and it really felt like a Cinderella story because I was playing at the time. I was playing with Melissa Manchester. This is like 1974, and we were touring the country in a station wagon. And I was making a little bit of money, but I mean very little money. And do you know Gary Katz?
Very well.
Yeah,
I wanted him to produce one of my records because he was a Steely Dan guy.
Yeah, and he's a great guy. And I auditioned for a solo album at ABC Dunhill when he was A&R over there.
Yep.
And he said, "Wow, I think you're really good, but they're never going to sign you here. So, good luck. Go write some music for Keith Emerson or something." I was playing him solo piano music. But miraculously, when Howard Rose, who was Elton's agent, when Elton broke up his band in '74, he decided he wanted to add a keyboard player. And I was reading about this in Rolling Stone, thinking, wow, what a gig that would be. And 6 months later, I was asked if I wanted to meet with Elton about playing keyboards in his band. And evidently he had heard these demo kind of solo album things that I had done, courtesy of Gary Katz.
Perfect.
Because Gary said to Howard Rose, there's this guy, James, let me look. And I went up and met with Elton.
Here in L.A.?
Here in L.A., up in Truesdale, this huge house. And he was, I was 23, so he was 27. And I never played a note for him, but I did see my album, my little funny little long-lost album there. And a week later, I was playing at Wembley Stadium.
Unbelievable.
Well, actually 2 weeks later because we did it. But yeah, and it was spectacular, and he was so generous, and it changed my life. And at a certain point, I felt like I had something else in me that I wanted to explore. I didn't know what it was. I really hadn't written very much at that point, but I felt like I had to leave the band. And so
That's really incredible because most people would say, I'm golden. I'm going to play in rock bands. I'm going to be a studio rat and play all these gigs. And look at my credential. I played with Elton John. So you left the band.
I did.
That's a bold move to leave Elton John's band.
Well, yeah, and I remember Elton saying to me, he was never anything other than the most supportive guy you can imagine. He said, use me. He said, use the fact that, you've been in my band. And I didn't even have to do that because everybody now had some idea of what I did, at least in the studio session world. And so I started getting a lot of work. And when I came back, and then somebody offered me a movie, and I turned it down. They offered it to me one more time, and I was scared, so I did it, and that was in 1984.
Was it Head Office?
It was.
I just saw the poster here. I saw the poster, and I thought...
Head Office.
I remember... I don't know if I saw it, but I remember the movie coming out because I knew Deborah Hill.
Right, what a nice lady.
And Linda Obst. They were
another
partners,
nice lady.
And I did some work with them, and I saw Head Office, and for some reason I thought, I wonder if this is near the beginning of James's
That
career.
was the beginning, and I loved it. I just fell in love. I thought, you know what? It's Eureka. I've found what I'm supposed to do.
How great. And you haven't since, or have you since, asked Elton John to either play on a score, write a song, an end title? Have you ever had any professional reason to use him?
That's a good idea. I haven't yet, although I've worked with him a lot since then.
Really?
I've
Playing
done
on records?
conducting.
Oh, nice.
We did some gigs at Radio City. I conducted for 5 nights, did some gigs in London. We're still good friends. He'll always be my hero, and I do anything for him. But I am going to think about.
I'm kind of feeling
let's set
a
that meeting up.
Fantastic Beasts 2 theme song.
Let's get another mic.
End title song.
We'll call Elton up.
Your cue. Somebody writes a lyric to your big theme. Not that I've done this before or thought of these ideas before.
No.
And Elton sings it on his world tour. I'm just saying.
I think
That's a
you're
big
onto
record.
something. Yeah,
That's
it could
a big
be.
record.
We might
Could
lose
be.
Robert. He's going to quit the podcast now.
Oh, no. I've done that. It works once out of 10 times you have those ideas. And but it's sort of a natural entrepreneurial instinct. You think,
you did
can
it.
you take the cue, can you get a lyric, and can you get a rock star? And then if somebody says they have a relationship with that star, you go, we're at least in the
It's
door.
so rare, isn't it? When it works, like you say, it's like going through a minefield. To actually have that succeed, and you did it in a big way on a number of occasions. So
I guess what you never share is how many times it wiped out.
Yep.
You see the 7 times it worked, but not the 140 times that it either didn't come close or you completely overpaid some B- rock star who you were hoping would have, their comeback single, and found out you just overpaid. They had a lark.
We're gonna
Nothing
take a quick break, guys. Coming up after the break, though, stick around. We're gonna play Name That Score.
Can we do it?
Name that score. Matt,
Yeah.
what's the topic today?
We're going to go through some hopefully recognizable Danny Elfman work.
Why would we do
Couple
that?
themes
That's so
that he's
nice.
done.
Awesome. All right, stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, Matt Schrader here, director of Score, a film music documentary. For the latest news from the film music world, follow us on Facebook. Just search Score, a film music documentary. Or let us know who you want to hear next on the show on Twitter, @ScoreThePodcast.
Welcome back to Score the Podcast. We're sitting here inside the awesome studios of James Newton Howard, and we're going to jump right into Name That Score.
Get ready to play Name That Score! The film music game where a perfect score means you, yes you, could be a winner. Now let's play Name That Score!
So here's how this works. We play 5 famous film scores, but in reverse. These are all reversed. You'll choose from 3 multiple-choice answers. The 5th and final question is worth double. If anyone gets all 5 questions right, we give away a prize on our Twitter account @ScoreThePodcast. Just mention Name That Score. And because the best scores have a memorable theme, so does this game that we're playing today. Today's theme is the scores of Danny Elfman. We will go ahead and jump into this stuff with question 1. And again, remember, these are reversed. I'll give you the options first. Is this from Big Fish, Edward Scissorhands, or The Nightmare Before Christmas? Answers.
Big Fish.
Robert's going to go after whoever
I'm
our
going to
guest
say whatever
says.
James Newton Howard says, so I'm definitely on Big Fish.
We're going to have to make Robert go first.
I'm going to go with, it has kind of a little, it reminds me of Nightmare
hear it
Before
again?
Christmas.
Nightmare
ahead.
Before Christmas?
Yeah.
Here's our answer. It is Nightmare Before Christmas.
I actually may
Way
not
wrong.
listen to you next time.
No, you shouldn't.
Kenny gets a point. And
I didn't realize it's when you said reverse, you meant backwards.
yeah,
right.
literally,
Yeah,
literally backwards.
It's a
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix tip.
Right.
Fire
Our
away.
second question here. Is this from The Simpsons, Alice in Wonderland, or Beetlejuice? Let's make Robert go first.
I'm going to go with the show that was recorded 100 feet from me 26 years in a row. I guess it's The Simpsons.
I'm going to go with Simpsons also.
Same.
Everybody? Yep, The Simpsons. So everybody gets points for that one.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We've all probably heard it hundreds of times. Question 3. Is this from Good Will Hunting, Batman, Kenny, or 50 Shades of Grey?
Oh, man. Robert, is it 50 Shades of Grey? I know you probably...
That's basically the color of my hair. So I would say if I'm going to go, I'm going to guess Batman because it sort of has a epic, even backwards quality. That's my guess.
I'm going to say 50 Shades of Grey just because if that it's what it is. Then I'm going to laugh at Matt for picking that score.
It was so memorable.
That's Batman.
That's Batman.
Yeah, it's
Here's our answer.
Oh, it didn't sound anything like Batman backwards.
It's from Batman. So points to
Now I'm the joke.
James and Robert.
Yep.
And Kenny.
Oh, man.
Yep.
Question number 4. Is this from Milk, Spider-Man, or Silver Linings Playbook? These are getting a little bit tougher.
It's so funny to even think, first of all, that's the music when Scarlett Johansson is having a bipolar episode. No, I don't think so. That's the music where Harvey Milk is being stalked by a crazed killer. No, I don't think so. By process of elimination, I'm spidering.
I'm going to go Spider-Man. I think it's Jennifer Lawrence who you were thinking of.
Well, Jennifer Lawrence, it's funny. There's a cameo by Scarlett Johansson that a lot of people aren't aware of.
Is that true?
No.
In your mind.
He's rewriting,
Right. I've recast
casting
it.
director.
That was very convincing, though, Rob.
It's Silver Linings Playbook 2.
Yeah, I'm going with Spider-Man, but that wasn't.
It is Spider-Man.
Wasn't backwards.
That was not backwards.
Yeah, I was going to say, that didn't sound mixed
Good
up.
ears.
You made a face.
That's we're giving everyone points. You got it anyway. So points for everybody on that one.
Last one.
Last question. This one's worth double. Not that it matters. I think we're all even here. So we're going to go question number 5. Is this from American Hustle, Men in Black?
There's your
or-
Jennifer Lawrence.
Or,
So it was actually a quiz
American
question.
Hustle. Or is this from Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
What are the choices again?
The choices are American Hustle, Men in Black, or Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Fire away.
I'm going Men in Black.
I'm going to say, just because of the bassy feel to it, it doesn't really fit with the other 2 films. So I'm going to go with Men in Black also.
I actually am going to be completely controversial here and go with Men in Black.
Points for everybody here. That is from Men in Black here.
What happens when there's a 3-way tie?
What is our lucky? Then somebody's got to win.
It's a complicated soccer game here. I think we do. There is a bonus clip. Should we try to play this last one?
I guess fire
Give
away.
me
See if
just
we
a
can get.
sec to pull it up. It's
We
a
can try.
tiebreaker bonus clip number 6.
Why?
He's actually not
I like
prepared.
that.
He's like, let me get the bonus clip, Google, find song.
That little switching device is pretty cool.
The little soundboard?
Yeah.
All right, let's try. This is our bonus question. Hopefully, this won't be too too easy for you all. We're
Fire
going to
away.
make Robert answer first.
Yes.
Here we go.
Are you giving no clues here?
No clues on this one.
Oh, okay.
But it's so clearly The Ice Dance from Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, he even knew the title.
Not that I'm a geek for film music cues.
I think this one might end in a tie. It's our first episode where
Anybody
we're
else?
not going to have a clear winner.
It's Edward Scissorhands, yeah.
James?
Who can argue with that? No.
All right. Points for everybody. That means we're all winners here today. All right. Congratulations, guys.
That was really satisfying. I don't know why. I just thought doing that game really just kind of raised the level of my day, and I appreciate James Newton Howard joining us for all of that and sitting through Name That Score. You're a great citizen for bearing through that.
Very fun.
But mostly, and I was talking outside before, we didn't get a chance to talk about maybe on the next time we bring you back, I wanted to reminisce a little bit about Water for Elephants, one of my favorite scores of yours, not heard by enough people. But I was telling some of the folks in your studio that when I teach a class on film music, which I do occasionally, I use a cue, which is when Robert Pattinson sees Reese for the first time in the round, and she's doing tricks on the horse, and the
I think I have that.
The audience noise just comes up a little bit, and then you basically are the dialogue.
Well,
This.
such a beautiful film. I mean,
So
Francis
beautiful.
Lawrence is so good.
Absolutely beautiful. And this cue,
Thank you.
well,
It's,
there's no dialogue. And it basically, you can see he's falling in love. You can see the magic of the circus in the faces of the kids. And then at the end, he says something like, the first time I saw. But
yeah, I love that movie.
I use that cue to show how music can tell story without words, because that
Is it fun to
says a lot.
score scenes that don't have dialogue?
Yeah.
that you can
it's
just
fantastic.
paint a picture?
Yeah. I mean, not a lot of people are willing to pull all the sound effects and dialogue out for a stretch of time. But yeah, I really enjoy that. The more of me I can get, the happier I am.
Oh,
I
that's
guess.
great. And we really enjoy having you here. And
Well,
yes, we did.
allowing us to come into your beautiful studio. It really means a lot.
It's been a pleasure, and it's great to see you, Robert.
Thanks,
It's
James.
been a long time.
And same.
Thank
Yep.
you very much.
Thanks, guys.
We do want to remind our listeners that this is a new show, and we're trying to spread the word. So please go on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Score the Podcast. And if you want to watch Score, a film music documentary, which inspired this podcast, you can get that at score-movie.com.
Thanks very much, Kenny, Matt, and James.
Thank you, everybody.